It's Ursula from ursula-smith.com, and today I am here with a video to show you how I do these domed leather pieces in the hydraulic press. So you can see this one's super domed. The other ones aren't quite as domed, and they're patterned with a pattern plate, cut with a pancake die, and then domed with a silhouette die. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Thanks for joining me, and here comes the project. So as I mentioned, I am going to try to be making a piece like this. So this one is, I've mentioned this before in some other videos, it's white wax coated leather, and I cut it with a pancake die, patterned it with a pattern plate, and then domed it with a silhouette die, all using the press. I've done videos before. I have a whole playlist on playing with leather using the Sizzix Big Shot, but today I'm going to be working with the press. And again, this is the leather. It comes in different colors. The Rocky Mountain leather looks like it's out of stock with the colors. I'm hoping they will get them back in, but this is more of like a brown color with the white wax over it. I will mention, so this leather is about 4 to 4.5 ounces. I asked them to split it for me to that weight, and it's a nice. It's nice. It's thin enough that I can cut things using the different tools that I have, but it's still stiff that I can pattern it and dome it, and it holds its shape. The other leather you can find easily is this craft store leather. So you can get it at like Amazon or Michael's, and it seems to be a little bit thinner and a little bit softer. So I don't love that as well. When you cut it with the pancake die, it frays. But if you're just starting out and just playing around with things and trying to see what works and what doesn't, you know, it's fine for that purpose. So today I am going to take my little sheet of leather, and I'm just going to cut it using my Fisker scissors. I have other scissors, like the Tim Holtz scissors, that I use to cut almost everything else, but that has a serrated edge, and I don't like the way it leaves the edge. And so just going to cut a piece that is going to fit for what I'm doing. So I'm going to use a pancake die, and usually this is an easy shape. I would suggest you start at least with the easier shapes. This is just a trillium. Any of the geometric shapes probably would work well to start out with. Like, I don't think I would go trying the little gingerbread man, because even though he cuts very well, he's a little hard to get the, especially when you're working with metal, getting the metal out of there. And then you're just gonna fit it into the pancake die. Now you could do this two different ways. So today I'm going to cut it first and then pattern it. You could pattern it first and then cut. I usually do it this way just because I have less chance of wrecking the pattern. And so this is the way that I normally do it. And then you'll see as we go along, there's another reason why I do it this way. So we're going to do our normal thing where we put it in the press, center it, and I'm using a manual. I don't know that I would do this with an electric. Of course, I've never used an electric one, so maybe you have good control over your machine, but with a manual, I can go to just resistance. And I mean, literally, a lot of times the needle on the gauge barely makes it off zero. So once I start not being able to push the handle down without really forcing it, that's when I stop. Leather is not as hard as metal, and so if you push it too far, it can just literally disintegrate before your eyes. When you're playing around, you'll probably find this out for yourself, but just going to resistance seems to work. And so when I go to cut this, you'll hear, hopefully, a little swoosh. When you do it with metal, it's like a big thunk, you know, when you've gone through. With the leather, it's more like this soft little swoosh. And again, if I'm meeting resistance, that's when I stop. So we're going to go ahead and pump. Hopefully you can hear. That was it, if you just heard that. So I'm not meeting resistance. I'm kind of going, and now I'm meeting resistance. And it really, the gauge has just barely gone beyond 0. So then I'm going to pull it out, and it's gone through. So generally I have to push the pancake die a little bit to be able to pop the leather out. And you will get a little bit of frayed edges. I will do a short little video at the end of what I do to finish those edges, but this leather frays a lot less than the craft store leather, so that's kind of why I use it. So the next step is we're going to take our pancake die, and I'm actually using one of mine today just because I want that pattern. So I just etched this etched steel with a pattern that kind of mirrors the shapes of some of the Potter dies I own. And before you do anything with leather, you should wet the back. And so I just normally use just a little spray bottle of water. Don't spray near anything that's steel, obviously, because you don't want to you don't want to rust your tools. And so it just damp. It doesn't have to be soaking wet. And I try not to get it wet on the front, again, just because I'm putting it on my steel tools. But then you're just going to place it on top. And then what I do is I do put urethane on top. And I just have a piece of the harder durometer. So it's like 90 or 95. I bought a big piece on Amazon, and I cut it with a bench shear. You could use tin snips as well. Don't do anything that's going to cause it to burn, anything mechanical. So, and then again, line it up in the middle, and you're just going to pump till you meet resistance. And so I'm meeting resistance now, and that's about as far as I'm going to take it. And that is plenty to give it good pattern. And so the second reason, as I mentioned earlier, that I do it this way now is it's still damp on the back. So now I can go ahead with the doming. So I'm going to use a silhouette die. And I've made a little mark on the back. I kind of worked with a bunch of pieces and just made a mark of basically where I can try to center this. And I've done this enough now that I know not just do it by hand, but I use the painter's tape to kind of tape it down so that it doesn't move. And so I'm going to do this off camera. And try to line it up as best I can. And then just put a piece of tape there to hold it in place. And you want the pattern facing to the inside, and then that goes between your die, your silhouette die, and the softer urethane. So I just buy this at Potter USA. And then you're going to place, again, the whole thing into the press, center it, and then just go until you meet pressure. And you're going to start to see the urethane lift up, and that's just to pressure. I could go like a little hair more, but if you go too far with the silhouette, you can always put it back in and do it again. But if you go too far, the silhouette dye could cut the leather. I mean, it can even cut the metal if you go too far. So you can see it did dome. And let's see. Well, I'm a little off kilter, so I will have to work with the edges to even them up. And I probably could go a little bit further with that. So in this case, it's a little dry on the back. I don't know if you can tell. So I could dampen it a little bit more and dome it a little bit more. And that's probably what I would do. But that is my process. I'll probably add on a couple of addendums to this video just so that you can see a couple of other ideas for using the silhouette dye and how I finish these pieces. So stick with me, and here comes the addendums. So I just wanted to show you how this turned out. So the white wax wore away with the pattern, which, so the pattern shows up. It did get a little bit softer with the doming using the silhouette dye, but I lined it up not too badly. So a little bit of sanding to kind of even out those edges, and I will show you what I do to finish these pieces coming up. Okay, so here's first the addendum. I ended up re-wetting the back. Tried to line it up again, so hopefully I did an okay job with the silhouette dye, and I'm gonna try one more time, and I'm going a little bit further. So I started to meet resistance, and I went about halfway down, and that domed it even more. So again, when you're playing around with this, you'll kind of get a feel for how far you can push, and it may be different for every leather. So you can see the dome a little bit more now, and I did get off kilter a little bit. But again, I'll go back in and trim these down to even them out. So, again, you're going to have to play with your leather that you're using and see just how far. I probably could have stopped a hair before this, but that's a pretty decent dome. So while I'm here, actually, let me see if I can grab another quick piece of leather. We might as well do impression dyes while we're here. Maybe this, something like that. So if you get too deep of a dye with the impression dyes, you start really getting into the realm of mushing your leather. So I'm gonna place my urethane on top, hopefully matching it up. And then I need my pusher in the middle. Center it. Oop. And again, same thing. This may be still a little too deep, so we're going to give this one a shot. Okay, I'm starting to meet resistance. And so now I'm only at like a 2.5. And see, that's what happens when you go too far. So I probably should have stopped at 2. But it started my cutting for me. So that is what happens when you get too greedy with your pressure. So I could have stopped at probably 1.5 to 2. And again, any wetness, you really want to make sure that you wipe off your dyes immediately. And I usually have, some kind of oily coating on it just to help with that. So the last piece of this video, I'm just going to talk about how I finish the pieces. So actually, let's go back to the first thing. So the ragged edges, I generally just use one of these nail files. My nails are always trash, so clearly I don't use it on my nails, but I use them to file away all the straggly bits after I've cut the leather, and then to kind of keep them tight, I don't know what a better word would be, I use this gum, I don't even know how to say that word, you can read it. And I use one of these kind of cotton ball type applicators to just run it along the edges and then the back. And it hardens the leather. So if you're looking for a natural leather look, this is not the way you want to finish. You're going to have to go off and do a little more research yourself. This is just the way I do it. I'm not a leather expert, so there's probably better videos out there, but I'm just saying this works for me. And so it just gives a harder edge that's not as frayed looking as when I started. This stuff stinks to high heaven. So wear a mask. The first time I used it without a mask, I was just teary-eyed and thought I was going to pass out. And then the other thing that I use on the top, and I've done videos on this before, there's lots of things you could use over the top. It kind of depends on what you're looking for. You can use an acrylic sealer. So this is actually made for leather, and it's got a lower gloss to it. I believe this was the one that I used, that. And so it still has a sheen, but it's not super glossy. The other one that I tend to, oh, that almost was a disaster. The other one that I tend to go with is this Resolene. I like the finish on that too. It's a little glossier. It doesn't tend to wipe away that white wax. Like some of the finishers can get rid of that white wax. And so the Resolene and that matte acrylic finisher tend not to. And so those are the two that I tend to stick with. So in any event, I'm sure there's lots of other options for you out there, but that's just how I do it. Thanks yet again for joining me, and we'll see you next time. Okay, I am back. Oops. And I tried one more thing. I decided I wanted to try it with a small piece of urethane rather than the big piece because I kept having trouble lining it up. And ooh, wow. Yeah, okay, that definitely did it. So you might want to play around with smaller pieces of the urethane. Oh, that definitely domed the piece. And it funnily did not break it. So that is very interesting. So you might want to play around with the big and the small. The other thing that I did differently with this piece is and I probably wouldn't, again, I pushed it past the point of resistance. I went one more push, and I probably, again, should have stopped at point of resistance. When will I ever learn? But the other thing that I did differently with this is I did the pancake dye, spritzed with water, did the pattern plate, and then right away I domed it. So the leather was still kind of wet when I brought it into the silhouette dye, and I kind of have my mark set up now so that I can line it up a little bit quicker. So In any event, you might want to, again, play around with the interior urethane versus the big sheet over it when you're playing around with leather. Thanks once again for joining me. See you next time.